Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses. Our hearing today looks at scams and risks in the securities markets with a specific focus on crypto. And given the recent collapse of an algorithmic stablecoin and the bankruptcy of several crypto lending platforms, this is a well-timed hearing. And of course, one would think that we'd hear from the SEC, the primary federal regulator of securities, especially considering that the chairman there considers nearly every cryptocurrency to be a security. That's the request Republicans made. Now, there must be some good reason why Chairman Gensler or one of his subordinates can't appear before the Senate Banking Committee to explain what the SEC was doing while several crypto lending platforms, including Celsius and Voyager, imploded, especially since the chairman himself would very likely claim that these companies fall entirely into his jurisdiction. Now, our Democratic colleague said he's not testifying today because it's possible that he may appear at the committee this fall. Well, that's little comfort to the thousands of Americans who lent their crypto to Celsius and Voyager, some of whom will be unsecured creditors now in those companies' bankruptcy proceedings. What was the SEC doing? While these companies and others were offering lending products that looked an awful lot like securities. And what's the SEC doing now to help ensure the crypto community gets the regulatory clarity it has repeatedly asked for? People, we all deserve answers now. We deserved them a long time ago. And Chairman Gensler has the answers to those and other questions. He just refuses to share them with us. Now, it's clear that some Americans invested in unsustainable schemes and even fraud, and we need to investigate that fraud and prosecute any violations of the law. But since at least September of last year, I've argued that some digital asset projects were offering returns that didn't make any sense to me, and that some of these endeavors would inevitably end badly. Well, over the past couple of months, those risks became reality. As I mentioned, Celsius and Voyager were offering interest rates as high as 18% if customers would lend their digital assets to these companies. Well, the firms would then lend that crypto to other larger investors to make short-term bets on crypto markets. Well, once the crypto sell-off began, the borrowers couldn't pay their debts, the platforms froze customer accounts, and now both companies are in bankruptcy and investors are staring at billions in losses. These circumstances beg the question, where was the SEC? Had the SEC responded to calls for clarity on how it would apply existing security laws to novel digital assets and services, something that I and many others repeatedly asked for, things might have been different. For instance, the SEC could have said how it intended to apply the Howey and Reeves tests, which the SEC uses as a primary mechanism for determining when something is a security. The Howey test has 4 basic prongs in determining whether something is a security. To be a security, there must be an investment of money in a common enterprise with a reasonable expectation of profits that are derived from the efforts of others. Well, it seems like the crypto lending products that I've mentioned had all 4 of these features. The SEC almost certainly believed that too, because in February they went after BlockFi for offering a similar lending product. Here's the problem with the SEC refusing to publish regulatory clarity about when digital assets or services are securities. In the absence of that clarity, you're left with this ad hoc approach to consumer protection known as regulation by enforcement. Now, there are at least 4 problems with this capricious and unevenly applied strategy that the SEC is pursuing. 1, it's a serious challenge for any well-meaning innovator striving to comply with existing laws and regulations if he doesn't know how they'll be applied. Number 2, it stifles innovation. Market participants who lack the benefit of understanding the SEC's thinking prior to designing a product, they may never create something that could be very useful to consumers out of a fear of how the SEC will interpret it. Number 3, creates a legal gray area that allows entities with a higher tolerance for legal risk to offer products that might be very bad for consumers. And number 4, it's ineffective. Just ask those who lost money on these crypto lending projects. Let me give another example. When the SEC announced insider trading charges involving a former Coinbase employee last week, it claimed that the offenders had illegally traded 9 digital assets that were securities. Now, the SEC, finally, in their complaint, they lay out the reasons why they believe these digital assets are securities. I'm very skeptical of their arguments. Yet they've still failed to disclose the rationale publicly before launching the investigation. That kind of approach is patently unfair to investors and developers alike. So Republicans have been arguing for a more thoughtful approach to regulating digital assets. The first place where we should be able to find common ground, and I actually think we're, in many cases, are close, is to chart a path forward for clear, sensible regulation on stablecoins. There's a clear bipartisan agreement that stablecoins should have consumer protections. There are virtually none now. I've proposed a framework to do that. I'm in discussion with several members to make this proposal a bipartisan one. Let me conclude with this. It's absolutely essential to investigate any fraud in the crypto market and any violations of existing law and prosecute those who are committing those crimes. So while I appreciate today's hearing topic, it's a missed opportunity without having the SEC here. Moving forward, I hope my colleagues will take a balanced look at these technologies, studying both the consumer risks that we need to deal with, that we'll, I think, hear about today, but also the enormous potential for consumer benefits that distributed ledger technology could bring. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.